Hello everyone, prepare to have your hair stand up on the back as you listen to these two mysteries which are the most terrifying you've ever heard. Unfortunately, these cases are impossible to break. In our video, let us look into the two dark unsolved mysteries that will never get solved. Baby Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. 92 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, August 4, 1892. The Borden family's maid, Bridget Sullivan, nicknamed Maggie, relaxed on her bed on a sunny day after washing the outer windows. When the clock ticked 11, she heard the city hall bell sound. The Borden daughter suddenly broke the hush. "Come down, Maggie. Come down quickly. Father is dead. Someone killed him inside." Maggie called the police. Andrew Borden's body was hacked almost beyond recognition. When the police arrived, they covered his body. Then they searched downstairs for evidence of an intruder. By that time, Adelaide Churchill, a neighbor who had come to comfort the Borden daughters, made a gruesome discovery on the second floor of the Borden home. It was the body of Abby Borden, Borden's daughter's stepmother. Investigators discovered Abby's corpse cold, but Andrew's was found warm, implying that Abby was slain at least 90 minutes before her husband. The Fall River Herald revealed that news of the Borden homicides under the headline "Shocking Crime," a venerable citizen and his aged wife hacked to pieces in their home. It spread like wildfire, and hundreds started pouring into 2nd Street, where for years Andrew J. Borden and his wife had lived in happiness. A Herald reporter who went to the crime scene described the deceased man's face as a wound 6 by 4 inches broad had been created across the left temple, as if it had been pounded with the dull point of an axe. The left eye had been pulled out and the nose had been trimmed to length. The man's clothes were drenched in blood, and his face had been cut to pieces. Despite the gore, the room was in order, and there were no traces of any altercation. According to the Fall River Herald, initial conjecture focused on a Portuguese laborer who had visited the Borden residence earlier in the morning and requested the wages owed him. Medical evidence revealed that Abby Borden was killed by a big guy who attacked the victim from behind. 2 days after the killings, newspapers began presenting evidence that Lizzie Borden, the younger than 33, was involved in her parents' deaths. Eli Benz, an employee at S.R. Smith's medicine shop in Fall River, informed authorities that Lizzie went to the store the day before the murder and tried to buy prussic acid, a lethal poison. It seemed that Lizzie and her stepmother never got along amicably. Although family members said ties between the two women were regular, they had not spoken for a considerable time back. Meanwhile, people saw Lizzie as innocent. From the majority of opinion, it may be said, in Lizzie Borden's life, there is neither a single unmaidenly nor a single purposefully nasty conduct. However, the lack of blood elsewhere except on the corpses of the victims and the police's inability to find any precise murder weapon led them to believe that someone within the Borden home perpetrated the killings. Moreover, since Lizzie's elder sister Emma was out of the house at the massacre, suspicion began to fall on her.
The murder weapon actually was never found and never proven to be an axe, although an axe they did find in the cellar actually matched the wounds on Andrew and Abby Borden's head, but they couldn't prove scientifically at that time.
Investigators wondered why Lizzie knew so little about her mother's whereabouts. They also considered Lizzie's claim that she was out in the rear barn searching for irons for a planned fishing trip, while implausible Andrew Borden was slain in the main room. The dusty floor of the barn loft where she claimed to have searched revealed no tracks, and the suffocating heat in the attic seemed unlikely to tempt anybody to spend more than a few minutes looking for equipment that would not be used for days. Theories concerning a tall male invader were questioned. One renowned physician stated that hacking is practically a sure evidence of a deed by a woman who is oblivious of what she is doing. In the courtroom above police headquarters on August 9, an inquest into the Borden killings was convened. District Attorney Hosea Knowlton questioned Lizzie Borden, Bridget Sullivan, home visitor John Morse, and others before criminal magistrate Josiah Blaisdell. Lizzie offered unclear and inconsistent responses during her 4-hour assessment. The hearing was delayed 2 days later, and Police Chief Hilliard arrested Lizzie Borden. Lizzie pleaded not guilty to the allegations of murder the next day and was carried by rail car to the Taunton prison, 8 miles north of Fall River. Lizzie returned to a Fall River courthouse on August 22 for her preliminary hearing. Judge Josiah Blaisdell ruled her probably guilty and ordered her to face a grand jury and possible charges for her parents' murders. The grand jury convened in November. The jury reconvened after initially declining to deliver an indictment and hearing additional testimony from Alice Russell, a family acquaintance who remained with the 2 Borden sisters in the killings. Russell told grand jurors that she saw Lizzie Borden burn a blue garment in a kitchen fire because it was smeared with old paint, as Lizzie described. The evidence, together with prior testimony from Bridget Sullivan that Lizzie was wearing a blue dress on the morning of the killings, persuaded grand jurors to prosecute Lizzie for her parents' deaths. Russell's evidence also convinced the Borden sisters to cut all relations with their old buddy. Lizzie Borden's trial began on June 5, 1893, at the New Bedford courthouse before a 3-judge panel. A robust defense team, including former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson and Andrew Jennings, represented the defendant, while District Attorney Knowlton and Thomas Moody argued the case for the prosecution. Moody presented the state's case before a jury of 12 men. The skulls of Andrew and Abby Borden were discovered when Moody inadvertently put Lizzie's blue gown on the prosecution table during his speech. According to a few sources, seeing her parents' skull sent Lizzie into a frenzy that lasted for many minutes, sending a rush of excitement through awestruck viewers and prompting actual irritation and discomfort to pierce the ranks of counsel. Lizzie sat behind a fan for most of Moody's 2-hour address, watching as the prosecution presented Lizzie as the only person with both the motivation and opportunity to commit the double murders, and then show the head of the axe that Lizzie used to murder her parents. The state's first witnesses testified about the events in and around the Borden residence on August 4, 1892. The most significant of these witnesses, 26-year-old Sullivan, testified that Lizzie was the only person she saw in the house when her parents were murdered. However, she gave the defense some solace when she said she had not seen any signs of Lizzie's rumored ugly relationship with her stepmother during her over 2 years of service to the family. She stated, "Everything was lovely. Lizzie and her mother were often talking." Other prosecution witnesses backed Sullivan's claim that Lizzie and her stepmother were getting along nicely. Sullivan also testified that Andrew and Abby Borden had stomach aches the day before the murder. Lizzie stated she was cleaning exterior windows during Abby's death. After Andrew Borden arrived home from his trip around town, Sullivan testified that she unlocked the door for him and then heard Lizzie's call for aid a few minutes after 11 o'clock. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Andrew Borden in the 2 hours leading up to his murder in various locations throughout town.
Spot where Andrew Borden was administered 11 blows to the head with a heavy blunt instrument.
On the morning of the killings, household visitor John Morse, 60, recounted eating breakfast in the Borden residence and then going to do chores. The following witnesses reported the events and conversations after the killings were discovered. Dr. C. Barry Bowen, the Borden family physician, related Lizzie's narrative about hunting for lead sinkers in the barn and her belief that her father's problems with his tenants had anything to do with the killings. On cross-examination, C. Barry agreed with the defense that the morphine he administered for Lizzie may have contributed to some of her confusing and conflicting evidence at the inquest after the killings. Another significant witness, Adelaide Churchill, recalls Lizzie wearing a bright blue dress with a diamond motif on her, but she didn't recall seeing any blood marks. Fall River assistant Marshal John Fleet remembers speaking with Lizzie immediately after the killings. When he named Abby Borden her mother, Lizzie corrected him. Lizzie said, "She was not my mother, sir. She was my stepmother. My mother died when I was a youngster." Alice Russell's testimony was once again the most powerful. Lizzie visited Russell the night before the murders, announcing that she would soon be leaving on vacation and feeling that something is hanging over me. "I can't tell what it is. I feel worried something will happen," Lizzie said to Russell after detailing her parents' severe stomach sickness, which she attributed to awful baker's bread. She wanted to go to sleep with one eye open half the time, for fear that someone may burn the home down or harm her father since he was so discourteous to others, Lizzie said to Russell. District Attorney Moody moved on to the Sunday after the killings and quizzed Russell about the clothing burning incident. "I will burn this old thing up. It's covered with paint," Lizzie said to Russell when she asked what she would do with the blue outfit. During cross-examination, defense counsel George Robinson tried to imply that a guilty person attempting to remove damning evidence would not do it in such a public manner as Lizzie supposedly did. According to Lizzie's testimony, Russell also mentioned a talk with Lizzie regarding a message she got from a messenger on the morning of the murders, summoning her to visit a sick acquaintance. Lizzie used the message to explain why she assumed her mother had left the house and didn't think to seek her when she found her father dead. The claimed message was never discovered after a thorough search of the Borden residence. According to Russell, she jokingly indicated to Lizzie that her mother may have destroyed the message. "Yes, she must have," Lizzie said, according to Russell. Robinson's performance pleased reporters, with one remarking that the ex-governor is absolutely without rival as a cross-examiner in New York City. According to one trial reporter, Robinson appeared ready to turn more or less to his account practically every government witness. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of the state's witnesses. "There has never been a trial with such spectacular inconsistencies offered by witnesses summoned for a single goal," wrote one writer covering the trial. The defense kept hammering on the prosecution's main witnesses' inconsistent testimony. The defense also questioned the prosecution's case. Where is the handle that allegedly broke off from the axe head that the state brought into court and claimed was part of the murder weapon? The government had no response. The defense also took advantage of the government's timeline, which allowed between 8 and 13 minutes between Andrew Borden's murder and Lizzie's call to Bridget Sullivan. Robinson attempted to portray the difficulty of washing blood off one's person, clothes, and murder weapon, then hiding the murder weapon, all within that short time frame. The three-judge panel ruling that Lizzie Borden's inquest testimony, which was riddled with inconsistencies and unconvincing assertions, could not be brought into evidence by the prosecution might have been the turning point in the trial. The courts found that Lizzie was effectively a prisoner accused of 2 murders at the coroner's inquiry. Her testimony at the inquest, given in the absence of her attorney, was not voluntary. The judges stated Lizzie should have been informed that she had the right to stay quiet under the Fifth Amendment. The justices dismissed the state's position that Lizzie was merely a suspect at the inquest, not a prisoner. Her statement should be included since it was more like denial than a confession. After a decisive setback, the prosecution rested its case on June 14. The prosecution wanted druggist Eli Benz to tell the jury about Lizzie Borden going to a Fall River drugstore the day before the murders and asking for 10 cents worth of prussic acid, a poison. The state attempted to prove the characteristics, properties, and applications of prussic acid through medical experts, druggists, furriers, and chemists with a jury, but it was dismissed. Each departed the courtroom with a palm leaf fan and cold water. After hearing the state's basic argument, the judges decided that the evidence should be omitted. The defense offered only a few witnesses. The night before the killings, Charles Gifford and Uriah Kirby saw a strange figure near the Borden residence at 11 o'clock. Dr. Benjamin Hanfey testified that at 10:30 a.m. on August 4, he spotted a pale-faced young guy on the sidewalk near 92 2nd Street. A plumber and a gas fitter testified that they were in the Borden's barn loft a day or two before the killings, throwing doubt on police claims that Lizzie's alibi was questionable since the loft's dust seemed undisturbed. The defense's most anticipated witness was Lizzie's elder sister, Emma Borden. Lizzie and her father, according to Emma, had an excellent connection. She informed jurors that the gold ring found on Andrew Borden's little finger was given to him by Lizzie 10 or 15 years ago, and that he treasured it. Even as she acknowledged residual bitterness over her father's transfer of a Fall River home, which Emma referred to as grandfather's house, to Abby and her sister, Emma asserted that Lizzie and her stepmother had good ties. The defense thought Emma would testify that the Bordens had a habit of burning leftovers and bits of clothing, but the court deemed the testimony inadmissible. A.V. Jennings, arguing for the defense, said, "From beginning to finish, there is not a single shred of direct evidence against Lizzie A. Borden. There isn't a single drop of blood, and there isn't a single weapon they have linked to her." Governor Robinson, who spoke after Jennings, maintained that the crime had to have been done by a crazy or a demon, not by someone with his client's good background. He claimed that the state had failed to fulfill its burden of demonstrating guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Furthermore, it was physically impossible for Lizzie to have done the crime within the timetable provided by the prosecution without the assistance of a confederate. Robinson dismissed the argument that Lizzie killed her parents while stark nude to avoid having blood marks on her clothes, claiming that the killings may have been done by an intruder who slipped out of the home unobserved. Justice Dewey charged the jury after Hosea Knowlton's able summary of the prosecution's evidence. According to one media article, if the judge had been the senior counsel for the defense, delivering the closing plea on behalf of the prisoner, he could not have more empathically laid out the foolishness of relying on circumstantial evidence alone. The newspaper said it was a remarkable charge, a plea for the innocent. According to Justice Dewey, jurors should consider Lizzie's extraordinary Christian character, which entitled her to every inference in her favor. Before arriving at her judgment, the jury deliberated for an hour and a half. "What is your verdict?" the clerk inquired of the jury foreman. The foreman said, "Not guilty." Lizzie screamed out of a joyful shriek, dropped into her chair, leaned her hands on the courthouse rail, buried her face in her hands, and let out a second joyous roar. Emma, her attorney, and the entire audience rushed to congratulate Lizzie. She said, hiding her face in her sister's arms, "Take me home now. I want to go back to the old location tonight." The jury's decision was largely applauded. Regardless, no matter how plausible it is that Lizzie murdered her parents, the prosecution failed to fulfill its burden of proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The state's case was primarily based on the assertion that no one else could have committed the crime. That, along with a few other dubious behaviors on Lizzie's part, such as burning her clothes, was not enough for the Borden jury to condemn her. Some assumed that if the defendant had been a man, the jury would have been more willing to convict. One of the defense's most potent arguments was that most people in 1893 couldn't believe a lady with Lizzie's upbringing could have committed such heinous murders. Lizzie Borden moved to Fall River after the trial when she and her sister Emma bought Maplecroft, a beautiful property on the hill. Lizzie became interested in theater. She attended many performances and socialized with performers, painters, and bohemian types. In 1905, Emma moved out of Maplecroft. Lizzie remained at Maplecroft until her death in 1927 at 67. In Fall River's Oak Grove Cemetery, she was laid to rest beside her parents' graves. Within 9 days of Lizzie's death, her sister Emma died. With the lack of evidence, people and the state hoped that the 1890 case of Lizzie Borden would never get solved. Isn't the dark side of the unsolved 1890 case chilling? So let us look into another mystery.
A Fox 16 News update for you. Investigators in Faulkner County now believe they've cracked a nearly 30-year-old cold case. Pam Felkins was found murdered in Greenbrier in 1990.
Greenbrier is a small town in Arkansas, Faulkner County. It's the internationally known Riddle's Elephant and Wildlife Sanctuary. Greenbrier is often regarded as Arkansas's safest city. Greenbrier is currently a delightful and secure neighborhood. However, not in the 1980s and 1990s. Then the community of Greenbrier grew out of a bit of a brothel. It was where the world met Pamela Faye Felkins. 32-year-old Pamela Faye Felkins was a mother of two and the working clerk at Crossroads Video Store in Greenbrier. In Greenbrier, Arkansas, the night of February 2, 1990 was chilly and wet. Pam was working at the Crossroads Video Store at the time. Her husband David Felkins was meant to pick her up from work. David arrived and saw that Pam wasn't there when he came soon before the 9 p.m. closing hour. An ashtray with a lit cigarette and a hot cup of coffee sat on the counter seemed unusual to David. The cash register was still ringing. Pam's pocketbook, keys, and coat were all in the store. But she had vanished. David reported her missing. A search team was dispatched to find her immediately after getting David's statement. Officials and volunteers searched for the 32-year-old mother of two until lousy weather made the search difficult. The search resumed in the morning and continued throughout the afternoon. Then two of Pam's relatives discovered a terrible find 2 miles south of McGinty Town on Clinton Mountain Road. Within a flash of the moment after the horrific discovery, her relatives wished to go and rewind the days with Pam. Yes, Pam's dead body was discovered at an old rubbish dump location. She had multiple cuts on her legs and had been battered with a blunt weapon around the head and shoulders, with a blow to the skull being the fatal injury. And a DNA sample was taken from her sperm. Faulkner County Sheriff's investigator Marty Montgomery, who went to school with Pam, was one of the initial investigators on the case. He also went on to serve as sheriff for 5 terms. Marty thought at least finding the inhumane animal could find some peace for Pam's kids and family. So he started to collect witnesses of the man who assaulted Pam. A young couple leaving the business just as the intruder entered it at 8:40 p.m. came the closest to becoming witnesses. The couple added that he was a tall, stocky Caucasian man in his 30s or 40s, with a tattoo or other distinctive feature on his left arm. Around the time of the kidnapping, someone eating at the Wagon Wheel restaurant next door to the video shop reported seeing a car there. A light blue Chevrolet with a white panel and a white camper shell was mentioned. Everyone within a 100-mile radius was looking for the vehicle, but it never showed up. Instead, they found that rape was allegedly committed at an abandoned mobile home on Heath Lane in Greenbrier. Montgomery said that they had received various intelligence reports from many sources. Alibis and polygraph testing cleared the persons who were brought in for interrogation. Other prospective witnesses were interrogated, and physical evidence was analyzed. However, the probe soon came to a halt. According to Bob Blankenship, then sheriff of Faulkner County, the inquiry might take long unless investigators find a smoking gun. There have never been more actual words stated. Before DNA identified the culprit, Faulkner County elected 5 additional sheriffs, but only after 18 long years. With the flourishing DNA technologies, forensic genealogists could search ancestral databases for matches to DNA samples recovered at crime scenes.
Over the years, DNA tests were performed on numerous persons of interest with negative results.
In October 2018, Faulkner County Sheriff Tim Riles announced at a news conference that they were able to use DNA genealogy with a 99% accuracy to discover the owner of the DNA acquired from Pam. Using unknown DNA, a family tree construction approach was utilized to identify Edward Keith Reniger. Investigators also retrieved DNA from the murderer's biological daughter, which revealed a 99% match.
It is with 99.9% accuracy that it is Edward Keith Reniger's DNA.
Our culprit has a history of sexually assaulting women and was sentenced to 10 months in jail in 1994 for kidnapping a Cleburne County lady at knife point who managed to flee. He relocated to Utah, where he resided with his father after his release in May 1995. He, a former truck driver, passed away in 2002 from cancer. He has been aggressive toward his 2 ex-wives, according to his daughter. He was the subject of a restraining order. The murderer's daughter confirmed that he was living in Greenbrier when the Felkins were murdered. He'd been a frequent visitor to the video store, but her daughter didn't recognize him, and neither did her friends or family. According to Solomon Graves, Public Information Officer and Legislative Liaison for the Arkansas Department of Corrections, the intruder has a surgical scar on his left forearm. But it was not what the couple witnessed at the video shop. Officials haven't closed the investigation yet, and they've been cautious with their language, referring to Reniger as the principal suspect in the case rather than the murderer. They'd prefer more supporting evidence, such as a murder weapon or something Pam had to wound up in Reniger's belongings. Investigator Kent Hill was unable to remark on whether Reniger had an accomplice. Felkins was under 100 pounds and stood 5 feet tall. Reniger was 6'4", so he could have easily outmuscled her, but it doesn't rule out the possibility of a co-conspirator. Other concerns and perceptions persist. What had Reniger been up to throughout his years as a free man? Was Pam Felkins the only one who died? Or did Reniger get framed up? Is there anyone who knows how to fit all of the puzzle parts together? Reniger worked at Verco Manufacturing in Conway from 1988 to 1990 or 1991, and Sheriff Riles requested the public's aid in knowing more about him. After being released from prison, he went to welding school at the Spartan College of Aeronautics and Technology in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Investigators Kent Hill and Johnny Folks are waiting for anyone who may have known Reniger or have information regarding his personal life or those he was affiliated with. But he seems to have no friends, and also even his ex and wives are not aware in depth of his past. Reniger is the primary suspect, but they don't have enough pieces of evidence to prove that he is the murderer. It's been 32 long years. There is not even a lead, and nobody had ever claimed they knew Reniger except his family, who are unaware of his darkest side.
You may not know a thing, you may know something you don't realize you know. And so we would love to be able to speak to anybody who had a relationship.
The 1890 case of Lizzie Borden and the 1900 case of Pamela Faye Felkins have similarities. We have got our primary suspects, but we could neither find the motive nor the murder weapon. Only God knows the darkest side of this mystery. Could you spend the night at the scene of such a dark, mysterious crime? Let us know in the comments. Never miss to like our videos and subscribe to our channel.